hearing about Ealing Council's budget and your chance to ask us some questions. This is the first of 3 question and answer sessions, and this one is aimed at businesses, and I understand we have about 50 or 60 businesses on this session tonight, and you're all very welcome. We have another session tomorrow night for residents and one next week for the voluntary sector. Before I introduce our speakers tonight, I wanted to run through a bit of housekeeping to help this session to run smoothly. As it's a webinar, you'll notice that you're on mute, and this is to aid the flow of the session and keep us on track. But we very much want to hear from you, and so to help that, you'll see that there's a chat function, and we also have a Q&A function. The chat function is there for you to message each other and panelists, and for you to have a conversation amongst yourselves about what's being said tonight. But we're also here to answer your questions, and at the end of the presentation, I'll be taking some of those. So please do post your questions in the Q&A box rather than the chat box, and do post them throughout the presentation so that we can start to see what questions are coming through, and you can also like each other's questions as well. You'll be able to see each other's questions, and you can vote for the ones that you think are the most important or relevant. We'll try and answer as many questions as we can in this session, but if we run out of time, we'll prioritise those that have got the most votes. So as I say, please do post your questions and like other people's, or upvote the ones that you think are the most important and you'd like to hear the answer to. This evening, we're also going to carry out some live polling. And if you'd like to take part in these, you'll need to allow pop-ups in your browser session, in your browser settings. So let's just have a quick practice at that to see how the polling functions work and make sure that everyone knows how to use them later in the session. So on your screen now, you should see a quite light-hearted poll that I hope is not too taxing for everyone, called "What's the best bit of Christmas dinner?" So if you could all please vote, cast your votes now. I'll just give you a minute to do that. Okay. Has everyone voted? So if we close the poll now and share the results. And you can see there, for those that were able to take part, roast potatoes, best bit. I totally agree. They've got to be crispy and crunchy, ready to go with your Christmas dinner. So there we go. So we're going to do some polls in the session, and if you'd like to take part, please do. If you couldn't see the poll, it may be that you haven't set the function, and you'll still have, so please do put your pop-ups on. Maybe that they're blocked on your device, but you've still got some time to do that, because the first poll isn't going to come for 5 minutes or so. Sorry about that. I'm sitting in a room with automatic lights and they just went off, so I might need to wave again at some point. One last thing is, if your Wi-Fi fails or you get knocked out of the session for another reason, we are live streaming this on YouTube, Ealing Council's YouTube session, and you'll be able to watch it there. And just to say that we all know that we can all have a few glitches with our Wi-Fi in this new world that we're operating in. So if any of our panelists do have a glitch, then please do bear with us. So for our speakers tonight, in tonight's session is going to be led by Councillor Bassam Mahfouz, Ealing Council's Cabinet Lead for Finance and Leisure, and he will give the presentation. And then at the end of the presentation, when you've asked your questions, I'll be putting those questions to a panel that consists of Councillor Mahfouz, Councillor Julian Bell, who's the leader of the council, and Councillor Kamaljit Dinza, who recently took on the role of Cabinet Lead for Business and Community Services. And we'll also be joined at this session by Ross Brown, who's the Council's Chief Finance Officer. So we've got a great panel to answer your questions tonight. So I'm now going to ask Councillor Mahfouz to turn on his microphone and webcam and to take us through the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Lucy, and thank you everyone for joining us this evening. We'll just get the presentation up on the screen, and up to you whether you want to have a picture of me in the corner as I present this, or if you prefer just to see the full presentation. But I'll just wait a moment to get that up on the so we can get that up on the screen for you. Fabulous. So thank you again for joining us this evening and taking time out during what I know is very, very difficult times for local businesses. So I'm really grateful that you've taken that time out to join us, and I really welcome the input and the ideas that you guys will present as we go through the course of the evening. Before I start, I just want to make sure that people are conscious of that Q&A box at the bottom of the screen, and the opportunity to make sure that you use that as I go through the presentation to write any questions that you have, and we'll look to answer those at the end of the session. So if we move on to the next slide, I really want to start by saying an immense thank you for everything that you've done and continue to do for our borough and our residents during this pandemic. We know that hundreds of local businesses joined the Ealing Together effort to support the most vulnerable, and your efforts and sacrifices have absolutely been noticed and appreciated by those across the borough. We know that businesses and the local jobs that you provide are absolutely vital to the economic health of our borough. And we want to do what we can to help you recover, grow, and become more resilient. When you do well, we all benefit. We know you've had an incredibly hard time these past few months, and we want to work in partnership with you. And this evening is about being transparent about our financial position. We're already working with many of you through our High Street task force, and I know that John Martin and others are on this call this evening, and it's great to have you all join us. And you'll also appreciate that COVID has hit our local economy hard, especially those small and medium-sized enterprises that are part of the Heathrow supply chain. We're also working with other West London boroughs via the West London Alliance to lobby for more support from government for Ealing, and have recently published a build and recover plan that has a strong emphasis on supporting businesses. And of course, this year is not yet over, unfortunately. As we come to the end of it, we know the uncertainty around Brexit that still remains may also present challenges for some of yourselves and how you operate. So this evening, I want to give you some of the detail about the kinds of financial challenges we're facing and what some of the consequences for businesses and the people who work for you might be. We're not putting firm savings proposals on the table until after Christmas, but we hope the information we share with you this evening will help you to understand the context for some of the tough decisions that we are going to be coming down the line. And I appreciate that not all of you on the call will necessarily agree with some of the decisions that we'll have to make. So we move on to the next slide. I want to talk first of all about the budget setting principles. So, yeah, as many of you, we set a new budget every year. We look at the projected demand for services and how much income we expect to receive. Included in those figures will be proposals for growth and transformation. And we've got a programme that we have encapsulating all of that called Future Ealing. We've worked hard to change the council so that we can do more with less at the same time. And also look to grow the borough. When budgets are tight, cutting our spending alone just simply doesn't work. So we've got to be bold and have strategies for growth as a borough if we are to survive. Before the coronavirus hit in March, actually the Future Ealing programme was really delivering in spades, really got us in a really good financial position. And then of course this has now happened and really taken us back many steps, which I'm sure you all as business owners will very much appreciate. On this slide, you'll see some of our budget setting principles. These are the rules that we set and look to follow when we set our budget. So here's where I come to you early on in this presentation and ask you for your feedback. So we're going to be launching the first poll, the first proper poll, and to be honest, my answer for the previous one, if I were allowed to vote, would have been the stuffing. But putting that to one side, we want to know which rule or principle of those listed do you believe is the most important? There's going to be a pop-up on the screen as you had before, and an opportunity for you to cast your vote or votes that we'll share at the end of the vote. So it should be up on the screen, hopefully, for yourselves at the stage. Oh. 2 seconds. There we go. So you now have the that list of our budget principles. So protecting the most vulnerable, building strong communities where people help others, focusing on preventing problems before they happen, empowering residents to do more, maximising employment and helping businesses grow, and focusing on providing services that really matter to people. So a chance for you to, again, as I say, vote for more than one of those, but which ones do you think should be our guiding principles when we set our budget for next year? Great. So I think hopefully everyone's had the chance to vote. So if we look to see the results of that. Okay, so unsurprisingly, maximising employment and helping businesses to grow is the top answer there, where with over half of you saying that, and protecting the most vulnerable coming in a close second. Then focusing on preventing problems before they happen. So appreciate the feedback that we've got from that, and we'll be taking that on board. And I'll be talking a little bit about some of these in more detail as we go through the presentation. Okay, so you can close that on your screens now. And I'll be talking a little bit now about the budget challenges that we face and the pressures that we have on our budget. So as many of you will be aware, our demand continues to grow, especially in some of our more expensive services, which are around providing services to, for example, children's services, where we have been very recently given extra responsibilities towards young adults with special needs and learning difficulties, which is something very close to my heart, and I'm sure many of yours who are engaged with a number of our special schools across the borough. But sadly, alongside that did not come the right amount of funding. So we had insufficient funding to match the new responsibilities that we were given as a local authority. Alongside that, we've seen homelessness continue to grow as an issue. And we have, of course, as a local authority, the duty to provide temporary accommodation to families where they are faced with homelessness. Now, you'll also appreciate, and many of you will have heard me say time and time again, the main source of our income has been cut since 2009. And you've heard, as I say, you've heard me say it before, but for every £1 of government grant that we received 10 years ago, we now receive less than 36 pence, which in itself is a huge challenge to any organisation, let alone a local authority with limited opportunities to raise funds. So COVID-19 as well has made those other income streams that we've had, and where we've tried to be more commercial, come under pressure. Of course, fewer people using our car parks, our leisure centres have been closed, and sadly, because of the economic fallout of COVID, less people in jobs, and that's meant obviously less people being able to pay their council tax. We've led the response on COVID locally, and the financial impact of our budget was £71 million so far. It was right, of course, that we responded in the way that we did by offering free parking permits for NHS workers, working with local charities and groups to help tens of thousands of isolated residents, which I know many of you assisted with as well, through our Ealing Together programme. And of course, as many of you will know absolutely firsthand, it was giving the millions of pounds in business rate relief and grants. And we led London in procuring PPE for boroughs. At the start of the pandemic, the government promised to cover the costs of this work, and we're still waiting for them to pay the bill. So that's really left us with huge financial pressures for this year, but also for next. So if we move on to the next slide, we can see the chart which shows the drop in our core grant funding since 2010, and it clearly shows a stark downward trend. We now get £143 million less from our government grant than we did back in 2009, despite the fact that demand at the same time has increased for services, and increased especially for those children's services that I've talked about, and in the area of housing and homelessness. So far, we've been able to meet this challenge with the Future Ealing programme, doing the things that you as business owners and residents as taxpayers would expect of us, which is focused on transforming our services, being more modern and efficient, putting more into our preventative work, which many of you have said that you want to see us do more of, rather than having to deal with the issues that come out as a consequence of not dealing with those issues. And getting, of course, better value for our money from our contracts, which we've driven through a commercial team at the organisation. So if we move on to the next slide, we'll see how we spend our money. This shows that where our total budget, £253 million for 2020-21. But you can also see that almost 60% of that is pretty much already committed to be spent on children's and adult services alone. And you can appreciate, given the current climate as well, how much more pressure there is in those areas. And you can also see some of those other key spend areas. We have, in terms of, about £140 million on adults and children's, school support, public health, all of those really critical services that we support as a local authority. The next biggest spends around housing and homelessness and our refuse and recycling contracts. And we spend just over £4 million on arts, heritage and libraries, which includes our libraries, museums, the Ealing Summer Festival, and our community centres as well. So you can see where some of the big ticket items in terms of our spend sit. And if you move on to the next slide, we'll see the scale of the challenge that we face and the gaps that we need to close. So this slide, ideally, we'd be able to update it following last week's announcement, the comprehensive spending review, and some more recent announcements. But it's actually symptomatic of some of the challenges that we face as a local authority. And the uncertainty that you have faced as businesses throughout the year is the same sort of uncertainty we faced effectively as a business trying to deliver core services and critical services to our residents. We had a promise at the start that the gaps would be paid in full, but yet because of the gaps in the financial commitments, not matching the extra pressures in recent years, and in addition to that, the unpaid COVID-19 bill, and our most recent estimates, we had a gap of about £23 million to close in year. That's actually lower than it was earlier in the year because we took some very severe measures internally to have a spending freeze and take a number of other significant measures to reduce that predicted overspend from 26 million to 23 million. But as it stood before the CSR and before some of the more recent announcements, we also had a financial gap of £28 million for next financial year, one of the biggest gaps we've ever had to face. And to put that into context, as it states there, £28 million is more than we spend collectively on recycling and rubbish, on street cleansing, on maintaining our parks, on libraries, on leisure, community centres, housing homeless people, and maintaining our roads and pavements. So that is no small feat to try and close in one financial year. But close it we must. So we'll move on to the next slide. And you will appreciate that as a local authority, just wait for the slide to change, we must balance our budget. Legally, we must do so. And of course, you'd appreciate, it'd be prudent for us to do so as well. But actually, if we can't, what we're already seeing in other local authorities up and down the country is that they are teetering on the edge of having to serve what's called a Section 114 notice. And what that means effectively is that they are declaring themselves bankrupt. A few weeks ago, we had Croydon Council, so not many miles away from us, having to go down that route. Many other boroughs have already stated up and down the country that they are on the brink of having to make that sort of decision. And we've already seen, as part of that previous 64p in the pound cut, the similar cuts that have been faced by other local authorities, that some other local authorities like Northamptonshire County Council have had to go that way as well. And this is not a party political point, I've got to be clear, and this is not about London versus non-London or one local authority versus another. The County Councils network, which is led by the Conservatives, recently warned that 1 in 5 of their members is concerned about balancing their budget. So this is absolutely a nationwide cross-party concern. And you will be asking, why can't we just borrow more? Why can't we use our reserves? Why can't we just get more income through other means? Well, so we set out this slide here to show that we can borrow for capital projects like our home building programme, but not for our day-to-day runnings, and there are very strict rules about being able to do that. The reserves, so we will almost certainly have to use some of our reserves to balance the books this year, but any of you will know you've all got savings, you've all got reserves of businesses potentially, and you can only use them once, and once they're used up, you can't keep on using it again. The money's gone. And so whilst we might use them for this financial year, we can't count on using it time and time again. And of course, whilst we have been transforming our services and improving efficiency through our Future Ealing programme, as I've said, the scale of the financial pressures and the uncertainty there is around income streams means that we are facing even greater challenges than we've ever faced before. So we'll move on to the next slide and talking about our priorities as a local authority in Ealing Council. And as business owners, you'll appreciate you have a reason for living, a reason for why you go to work every day and what you want to achieve from that. And for us, that's about the manifesto commitments that we made just over 2 years ago and were elected on by the public out there, which was those 3 manifesto commitments of making Ealing a healthy and great place to live and work, providing opportunities and living incomes, which is very much where we obviously work with you in order to achieve that, and providing good, genuinely affordable homes. So those are our main goals. And alongside that, we have our transformation programme, Future Ealing, which is about making the borough better, modernising the council, and providing quality services at a time of those drastic cuts to our government grant. And it had so far been working. We focused on our priorities, our Future Ealing goals, and they've guided our strategy. As well as changing how we work, Future Ealing has also saved £50 million since 2018. And we'll continue our Future Ealing programme because it's the right thing to do. But the scale of this budget challenge means that on its own, it's unlikely to be enough to close the gap that we're facing. So if we move on to the next slide, a poll is coming up, guys. So another chance for you to click on those buzzers. What are our options? Well, I referred briefly to the Comprehensive Spending Review last week by the Chancellor. We didn't know what was going to come out of it, but what has been clear in terms of a message to local councils is that the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, very much expects local authorities and has incorporated a 5% council tax and social care precept increase into the figures that he announced last week. So by making it crystal clear as part of that announcement that he is assuming that council tax increase of 2% plus a 3% social care precept increase already built into the figure that where he stated local authorities would have a 4.5% increase in our core spending powers. And in fact, the contribution towards that £2.2 billion that he referred to, over half of that £2.2 billion comes from that 5% council tax and social care precept increase. So it's very much, it's already built in those figures. But here's where the poll comes in. So really, Again, keen to get your feedback on this. So sort of three things that we're looking at the moment in terms of how do we try and close that gap. So assuming we continue with our future Ealing efficiency programme and we take the Chancellor's, and assuming that we take the Chancellor's request for us to increase the council tax by 5% as government expectations, what additional there would still be a significant gap on our finances. So which of these three, you can choose more than one, would you feel would be the most appropriate steps for us to take so we can increase our income through fees and charges? Although we don't know, of course, what that will look like in terms of future years for some of the economy. Obviously, leisure centres, planning, that sort of thing. And then statutory services. So we could provide only the services that we have to, that we're legally obliged to. Or we could decide to spend less on the statutory services that we have to by law. So I'll open it up now in terms of your chance to vote and look forward to seeing what you have to say. And whilst you're doing that, just to remind everyone that you can use the chat box or the Q&A to pop open, ask your questions as well. And I believe that we've already had the point about, yes, we'll absolutely be happy to share that presentation. And of course, this is being broadcast on YouTube and you can watch and share later as well. So I think everyone's probably had the chance, hopefully, to vote. It's multiple choice, so you can have more than one vote there. So we'll see what that came back with in terms of feedback. Okay, so very clear there in terms of our guiding principle should be about spending less on statutory services, those services that we must provide by law. So because I think that's really interesting feedback. So thank you very much for that, because I think some of the things that we don't do statutorily are actually some of the things that probably people value the most across the borough. So it's a really clear steer there from yourselves as business owners across the borough. So I really appreciate that feedback. So moving on, I want to we'll be sort of looking towards wrapping up the question, this section here. So just to run through what our decision-making programme looks like. So as I say, no decisions have yet been made, but we will have firm proposals in the new year. We'll be looking to do more engagement sessions in the new year. And in terms of the official decision-making processes, we are looking at the 9th of February for Cabinet to put forward a budget for next year. And also for the 23rd of February is when the full council comes together to consider the budget and potentially put that forward. So that'll be the final decision-making process there. If we move on to the next slide, I think one thing that we've all learnt from the pandemic and has been shown itself to be more important now than perhaps ever before is the need to work together. And we know that times are tough, and that what's been shown through the pandemic is that we're absolutely stronger when we come together, and that we can achieve more by doing so. As I say, we know that times are tough, and we know that many of you are not only struggling because of COVID-19, but also that uncertainty of Brexit. So what we're going to do in terms of enabling economic growth is that we will look to work together with yourselves as businesses and to improve our town centres and high streets, make Ealing an attractive place to live and work. We'll continue to deliver on our manifesto pledge to deliver 2,500 genuinely affordable new homes, so more people who work for you can afford to live in the borough and to attract more people to live here. And of course, a bigger population means a bigger customer base for your businesses and potentially a bigger pool of talent for your staff. And we want to keep investing in our employment and skills service so that you can train and reskill your workforce, support apprenticeships, and play our part in the upcoming Kickstarter programme. And if any of you haven't yet got involved with the Kickstarter programme, please do get in touch. It'd be great to make sure that we can enable you to do so. So through our planning policy, we also want to be flexible about the use class orders so that we can try and avoid empty units and run down high streets. We want to develop our inward investment programme to support existing businesses and attract new businesses to the borough, to diversify our business base and make the economy here more resilient. And of course, we'll continue to lobby for a better deal for West London from government. But what we can't do, and just to be upfront, is that we can't change business rate levels. We appreciate that many businesses this year have been given a business rate holiday. But at the moment, as of last week's CSR, that hasn't been continued into next financial year. And of course, we can't influence rents and what landlords charge. But we are asking if you can continue to work with us to operate safely, as many of you are doing absolutely phenomenally and great cost to yourselves to operate safely during the coronavirus crisis. And we will soon be announcing, hopefully in the next week or so, a new tranche of business grants and support package over and above those most recent government announcements, which I'm sure you'll all be interested in as well. And we'll make sure that gets out to yourselves and colleagues in the next week or so. And of course, the other element is that if you employ people, you can play your part in our recovery through apprenticeships, local recruitment, skills and training, and there's lots of support on offer through ealingworkwest.com as well. So at this stage, thank you so much for listening and for engaging with the question with the poll so far. We'll be opening up to a Q&A, and I'll hand back over to Lucy at this stage. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Councillor Mahfouz. That was a really good and clear presentation, and I think we've got some questions starting to come through. So I'm now going to ask Councillor Bell and Councillor Dinser to turn their cameras and microphones on, and we'll start to look at some of the questions that are coming through.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening, Councillor Bell. Okay, I'm not sure whether we have Councillor Dinser, but let's start the questions and we'll see. Okay, so the first question that came through was from Tony Mulverhill. Perhaps Councillor Mahfouz, if we could start with you. So Tony's question was, the choices to vote on increasing fees or cutting statutory services seemed quite blunt. Are there other options that the council might have to address the challenges?
Yes, thank you, Lucy, and thank you, Tony, for the question. And I appreciate, the questions are relatively blunt as we put them, and it'd be great to go into the complexities in terms of the detail of how we'll be making each of those choices, and of course what sits under each of those choices is a lot of detail that people will be incredibly interested in. So, when it comes to, for example, increasing fees and charges, there may be some fees and charges that people are happy to see increase, whereas others, they may be very much aghast at us considering having to increase it at all. And of course, again, some statutory services, some people will value more than others. But I think, again, it was just to try and get a bit of a flavour as to where people would like us to perhaps prioritise. And I think that was really quite interesting about actually people value our non-statutory services that we provide as a local authority. So trying to continue to do as much of that as possible is the sort of message that I got from that. But appreciate there'll be nuances that people want to get across to myself, Julian and Kamaljeet. And this is about, this isn't just about a one-off engagement session this evening. This is an ongoing engagement. My mobile telephone number's online. Our email addresses are available all the time. We're very easy to get hold of. So I value the opportunity to continue to engage. And I know that Councillor Jasbir Anand, when she held the portfolio, did a number of engagement sessions with businesses, and we've got the High Street Task Force and so on. So I know that Kamaljeet Dinser is very keen to continue in her footsteps in terms of that ongoing engagement as well.
Great, thank you very much for that answer. We've got another question here for perhaps if I go to Councillor Bell. We've got a question here from Abby Srivastavava. Is there any changes or plans to increase capital projects? What are the top capital projects in Ealing that the council's focused on?
So the biggest one is our Broadway Living Genuinely Affordable Homes capital investment that we're making. We had a cabinet report back in early November where we made the biggest investment that Ealing Council has ever made, or a commitment to invest £400 million, and that will allow us to build a substantial proportion ourselves of the 2,500 genuinely affordable homes that it's this administration's commitment to do. We won't have built them all by spring 2023, but the objective was to either have built them or to have started by that period and have 2.5 genuinely affordable homes. So this significant 400 million investment allows us to really make a start. We want to do more than that. So beyond May 2022, we'll be looking to build 500 genuinely affordable homes every year going forward. Councils have not been able to build homes for a long while. We started to do this in 2009 as a council. So we realised that it's a great way to kickstart the local economy as well. Local suppliers being able to help with this. Also, it provides jobs for local people, and equally the key thing is it gives us genuinely affordable homes. So I guess that's the biggest. There are other big projects around some of our buildings, replacing Percival House with a new Percival House. That's a big capital investment. Rebuilding a new Gurnell swimming pool with some enabling housing development as well. That's another huge big investment, some of which are all kind of integrated into that Broadway Living investment that I've just talked about. But those are two big examples of how we're going to do that.
Great, thank you. And Councillor Mahfouz, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think, Julian's covered that pretty comprehensively. Clearly, Gurnell is another huge one that we're looking to redevelop the site with a brand new 50-metre 10-lane swimming pool, which will be a great leisure facility, which obviously we know that the impact of that both on physical and mental health, particularly after what we've seen over the past year, is going to be absolutely critical. And the number of schools that use it, it's got the biggest swim club in the country, so being able to redevelop that hopefully in the next few years and have a new Gurnell will be absolutely key to that as well. And again, off the back of the investment that we're making into Broadway Living, our council-owned company, in terms of developing that genuinely affordable housing, we'll see that come through at Gurnell and other sites. And of course, there's lots of work that's going on with schools. I mentioned about special educational needs. I used to be the chair of governors at Mandeville School, and we're doing work at the moment to try and redevelop St Anne's, which is the high school for our children with the most severe special educational needs. So again, lots of great work that's going on around the borough. And I think one of the things that we tend to do, and you'll see at Gunnersbury Park, at Rectory Park in Northolt with the Middlesex FA, is that we've got lots of great facilities that are going up, which are also where we bring in external funding as well. So we're always looking to make sure that we get that best value for the pound that we're spending as a local authority by bringing in external organisations. And I think actually on one of our participants, I'd be neglect to not mention London Tigers and the fantastic facilities they've got in Southall and what they've been doing, but working with community groups and local businesses to try and really make sure that we get additional new facilities in the borough, and that we do so where we can by working really closely with fantastic local organisations and businesses.
Great. Thank you. Okay, another question that we've got, which I think must relate to some of the business grants that the council's been giving out, from Amrit Singh. Would it be possible for the council to offer a receipt for the submission of a grant application? The form, to quote, leaves applicants completely in the dark. Councillor Mahfouz, is that one you can pick up for us?
Of course, yeah. So, I completely appreciate what Amrit's saying there. I mean, obviously, a lot of business owners come directly to me, and we're going to Jasbir previously, and we'll be going to Kamalji in terms of where they're at with their business grant applications. And I think absolutely, if we can try and, obviously, we've had to put new processes and systems in place to try and manage something that was completely brand new, and we haven't really had too much support to try and deliver. So absolutely, if we can try and improve the process to make sure that everyone is as clear as possible as to where their application stands, at least that it's been submitted, maybe some timeframes as to when they should hear back and that sort of thing. Just to if we can build that into the system, then we'll do that. I mean, certainly the receipt that Amrit is talking about, I'm sure shouldn't be too difficult, but it's just need to speak to the IT guys about making sure that happens. So if we can do that, that'd be, I'll get onto them to see if we can do that, Amrit. So really appreciate that.
Probably might be worth saying a little bit about the next round of, there is some further grants that the
absolutely.
government
So there's some funding that's been announced, which obviously relates to businesses being impacted by the lockdown 2. Great name for a movie, terrible name for a scenario that you have to live through. But for lockdown 2, and also obviously because we're still in tier 2, businesses that are impacted by tier 2 are eligible for funding for pre-lockdown and post-lockdown impact. And touch wood, there isn't obviously a lockdown 3, but again, there potentially is funding that would be available from that point of view. But in addition to that, there has been another discretionary grant that's been allocated to local authorities to distribute to businesses. So in the same way that we came up with a sort of best way of distributing that to businesses that had missed out on the direct government grants, so where people who had not necessarily been eligible for direct government grants via ourselves, but were still very much impacted, and there were certainly considerable numbers of businesses. And we know that the vast majority of businesses in Ealing are very much the smaller micro businesses and sole traders and so on. Some of those people were being most impacted by COVID, but weren't necessarily being supported by some of the official streams, and so that's where we sought to focus our discretionary grant. And at the moment, we're developing those proposals as to where we would allocate the limited funding pot that we have through there, and we're trying to make sure that actually it's about innovation, trying to recognise the type of organisations and businesses that we have across the borough, those who will miss out on the funding streams, and where we can look to grow back the borough, in the ways that we need it to, in order to build up those jobs and those quality jobs that we've talked about earlier in the presentation as being a key thing. So I can't really give too much away at this stage, unfortunately, but the number of innovative ideas that we have to try and do that, and we'll be looking to bring that forward next week, and happy to share that obviously with everyone who's in attendance today and obviously beyond as well.
Thank you, Councillor Mahfouz. We've got another question here. I don't know if anybody knows the answer, from Tony Mulverhill, saying Kickstart seems a very bureaucratic challenge. His daughter was told she needed to wait 13 weeks to be eligible for a Kickstart role. Do we know?
Yeah, well, I can say as in my other role in my day job as an employer, I've put on the table a number of different jobs that I would like to recruit to, a number of different opportunities for young people in these Kickstart roles, and actually I'm still waiting for the JCP to even sign off on them. So this is a program that was supposed to have started in July of this year, ends in July a year and a half time. Is very limited in terms of its span, and 6 months into the project they haven't spent a penny yet, as far as I can see, because they haven't signed off any of the Kickstart roles. So it sounds like, Tony, what the the JCP work coach is saying is that your daughter needs to be on universal credit for 13 weeks by the sounds of things before she's eligible to be put forward by her work coach for one of the roles. At the rate that the JCP and DWP are working, and it's not for me to say that large government organisations are bureaucratic in any way, specifically, of course not the DWP or the job centre, but certainly at the rate they're going anyway, I mean, she'll probably unfortunately be on that 13-week mark, but happy to take that offline and have a conversation with you, Tony, about some of the detail that sits behind that. But I think my key thing with yourselves as business owners is really that I know that some of you won't meet the threshold for having applied for obviously 30 vacancies directly, but both ourselves and West London Business are acting as brokers for small businesses who would like to take on and give a young person that kickstart, that chance, that start in life with a 6-month work placement within your business.
So my understanding, Bassam, is that it's for 16 to 24-year-olds on universal credit who are at risk of long-term unemployment. So I'm assuming that's. I've been Googling it, Tony, while we've been talking to see if I could find that 13 weeks eligibility rule that you're talking about. I've not managed to find that bit, but it does say that a young person's got to be in danger of long-term unemployment. So presumably that's where that 13 week comes from. But yeah, we've bid for and got additional monies for our West London Alliance job support scheme that we've been operating for, and Lucy, you can probably tell me how much it is. I think it was about £8 million that we got in order to support more job seekers into these kind of roles that we hope are going to be created, and so we can do that work to help people to get into these roles.
Yeah, that's right, Councillor Bell. So, I mean, Tony, please do get in touch with us. And if I'm not sure if you're a resident of the borough, but if your daughter is, then certainly we can see what we can do through our own employment support programmes as well. Okay, does anybody have any other questions for our eminent panel? I'm not seeing any others. I mean, we've got, I think, 27, 30 or so businesses on here. So perhaps before we wrap up, invite perhaps first Councillor Bell and then Councillor Mahfood, if there's anything else you'd like to say to the businesses that we've got on the panel around what the council's doing, or any other messages.
Yeah, I'll begin and let Bassam kind of sweep up behind me. In terms of in true Liverpool style, I'm sure he'll do a splendid job of that. First of all, to say I see a lot of familiar names in the list of participants. So and got the London Tigers reference, Mesbah, from Bassam. So thank you all for what you're doing in the borough and for all of the positive things that you give to our residents. I guess the big challenge that we're all facing is COVID. At the moment, we need to get the messages out to people to follow those rules. If you've been looking at the news today, yes, last night and today, you'll see that kind of London's now the highest region for case rates, and there's a real fear that we may have to go into tier 3 before Christmas, which would be devastating for businesses that are already kind of on their knees and struggling, and just hoping that this little window before Christmas can give some respite. So the message we've got to give out to everybody, and it's really urgent, is to follow those rules and make sure that everybody's kind of been as COVID safe as they can be in their businesses, and particularly the shoppers out there to shop safely. You know, I've had conversations with Matt Hancock yesterday, with other London leaders and the mayor, to see what we can do to try and stop London having to go into tier 3 before Christmas, or at all. But it's a huge challenge. But you know, we're here to help in any way that we can. The light at the end of the tunnel is there with the vaccinations. You know, we're working very hard to make sure that we work with the NHS to get those vaccinations out to people. It will take months rather than weeks, but hopefully that will get us back to some kind of normality. We are looking to roll out some asymptomatic rapid lateral flow tests, and that was one of the asks that we gave to Matt Hancock yesterday as London councils. If we're in danger of going into tier 3, can we have some more both human resource support and also some financial support to help with that rapid testing? It's likely to be focused on the northeast of London initially, but you know, we're doing everything we can to try and help on that front. I'll let Councillor Mahfouz come in next.
Thank you, Julian. And I think, yeah, absolutely. You know, the biggest concern as we approach, obviously, you know, Christmas is what's going to happen next in terms of you know, which tier is London moving into, the impact on yourselves as businesses, and obviously the personal impact it's going to have on you as you know, human beings and individuals, and yourselves and your families in the next few weeks and months, and you know, trying to see a light at the end of this tunnel. Throughout this time, this really key time of uncertainty and challenge, one of the things that you want from us as a local authority is some of the certainty, some of the, you know, understanding about what support we're going to be offering. And so I know some of the other questions that popped up subsequently is in relation to obviously being in touch with either myself or Julian separately, and we're happy to share details of that, of our contact details. And also one of the things that we will be doing is obviously in terms of the grants. So far, as part of the new announcement, there were new grants worth over £13 million. The discretionary grant that I've referred to that I'm going to be publishing an individual cabinet member decision about next week is worth roughly £6.8 million. We do have a page on our Ealing Council website which shows details of those grants and how to apply. And I know that we've got a business newsletter as well, which goes out. But anything you guys can do in terms of spreading the word to make sure that, you know, we're supporting as many business owners. Yeah, I appreciate some of you will have shop fronts, some of you will be working from offices, some of you will be, like many other people, will be working from home at this time. So trying to get that message out is more important than ever before, and actually, you know, is perhaps even in some ways a bit more difficult as well. So what I wanted to, so I've seen a question that's coming from John, so I'll just try and have another chance to read it, but if ask if there's...
You can come in there, Baz, because I've said to John, yes, of course, we'll respond to him. And thank you, John, for what you've been doing with the High Streets Task Force. It's so much better when these initiatives are led by businesses themselves, and we know from the magnificent success that Pitsanger Lane is, how effective you and all the business owners are there, and I know how difficult it is as well. So yeah, we'll put the word out and see if we can get more businesses to get in touch with you and the task force and see what we can do to kind of galvanise a kind of team Ealing to work with Team Pitshanger.
Yeah, I think absolutely. I mean, when we've done our future Ealing future Ealing sessions that we've done in the past, and one of the things that didn't necessarily get a high vote this evening, but actually we can't do this by ourselves as a local authority. We can only do this in partnership, as I said, really working together with yourselves as local businesses, but also our local residents, and engaging with them and all working together towards those sort of common causes. So if business owners don't comply with the COVID-19 restrictions and try and make sure that their shoppers are staying safe, then that impacts on all shopkeepers. If we don't do what we need to do, then again, that the impact is on everyone. And equally, if our residents go out there and are effectively sort of spreading the coronavirus, it's everyone else who will have to face the consequences, sadly. So we're in this together in terms of facing these challenges, and we really want to work together with everyone in order to tackle those. What I wanted to get across this evening is really appreciate the challenges that you face, and for you to be able to appreciate some of the challenges that we face as a local authority, and what we're trying to do to get your feedback in terms of where we go in the future. And lots of people talk about what the new normal looks like, so trying to shape what that new normal will look like for local authorities. But out of and this is obviously one of the key things, is this is, as they've already talked about, potentially the worst recession for 300 years. But actually, what we know out of every recession that's come is obviously a new growth, a new rebirth of different businesses, potentially different growth in different areas, and that's where that innovation is able to come to the fore. And I hope that we can work with local businesses in order to really drive that forward, and a really bright future potentially for Ealing over the next few years. But thank you so much for giving up your time this evening. Thank you for everything you do, and I really look forward to working with you closely, as I know that obviously as Councillor Julian Bell has already mentioned, and Councillor Dinser, who's new to the portfolio, is very keen to get into as well. But thank you again.
Thank you, Councillor Bell and Councillor Mahfouz. And I think you were saying we had one other question, which was how can people reach out to both you and Councillor Bell? I think your email addresses are on our website, is that right?
Yeah, I just typed mine in the answer.
Great.
And we're very happy to respond to specific issues and challenges that any business might be having.
Great. Thank you. So we're coming to the end of our session, and just remains for me to say thank you very much to all of you who've given up your time to join us tonight. As you can hear, we very much want to hear your ideas, your suggestions that you might have for how we can close our funding gaps. There's an email address that we've set up, Talk Future Ealing, which is talkfe@ealing.gov.uk. I think that should be on your screen now. So please do email us any ideas that you might have for savings, anything perhaps that you've seen working elsewhere where you run your business, or in other boroughs, or in anywhere else in the world, really, that you think where things work well, that might be ideas that Ealing Council could take up. I'd also like to thank our panel, to Councillor Mahfouz, to Councillor Bell, and to the support of Ross Brown, our Chief Finance Officer. And we hope you found the session informative. We're planning to run some more of these sessions next year, certainly in the new year, when we have some firmer savings proposals to share with you. So please do watch out for an invitation from us for those. As we said earlier, a recording of this session will be available for you on our Ealing Council YouTube channel. So thank you very much again. I hope you have a very good rest of the evening.